Opera Chat with Matt. People pay money to hear this. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Opera Chat with Matt. I'm very excited to present to you today two of my favorite people in the industry. We've got first Laura Brooks Rice, who is one of the teachers for us at the Washington National Opera with the K Fritz Young Artist Program. So we're very excited to have her. And we're also very excited to have my favorite tenor on the scene, Matthew Polenzani. Hi, guys.
Thanks for those words. That's
Thanks.
lovely.
So let's start off. I don't care who goes first, but let's start off just giving me kind of the paragraph summary about you, who you are, what you do, and how you do it.
Go ahead, Laura. You go first.
Oh, great. Thanks. Well, let's see. I was a singer.
Still a singer.
Still am a singer. Much like you, Matt. I did my undergraduate and my graduate work and then the young artist scene. I was the first Adler Fellow. Did my training in San Francisco and had lots and lots of fabulous mentors there. There are too many to list. I started teaching right out of the Young Artist Program at Westminster Choir College as an adjunct professor, and started sort of forging a dual career. And it wasn't long after that I met Mr. Polenzani, and we began working together. My main mentor was Margaret Harshaw. It was also Matt's teacher as well before we started working. And she would come to Princeton every summer and teach all day and then teach me afterwards. And then we'd go to dinner every night. So I got so much from her way after grad school that I was able to spend that much time with her and hone my own teaching. I just retired from Westminster Choir College last spring after 34 years. There, I taught many classes as well as teaching students. I've taught at the Met program. I've been at the K Fritz program for 5 years now, where I have the pleasure of working with people like you.
Oh, thank you.
Is that Wikipedia enough?
That's perfect. That's beautiful.
All right. So, as Laura said, yeah, we came up kind of similarly at undergrad, grad school, Young Artist Program. For me, it wasn't San Francisco, it was Chicago.
Right.
I left that program and moved straight to New York. And that same year, I started at City Opera and also the Met. That was in 1997. The Met sort of gradually brought me along, and I was careful to make sure that I did lots of things outside of the Met too. Wasn't there all the time. And a lot of times when singers, especially the younger singers who were going through the Met, when they asked me about how I climbed the ladder there, I mean, the first answer, of course, is usually, well, I was always as well prepared as possible. I was ready for whatever they threw at me. The next answer right behind that was, and I also made sure to say no to them sometimes.
Sure.
So I could go and sing Romeo in Bordeaux, or Barber in Seattle, or et cetera, so that I made sure that I was growing in leading roles too. So my first year at the Met was 97, and I've sung there every season since. And that will, I mean, I'm interested to see where we go next season.
That's
Actually,
right.
hoping that is a streak that will continue.
Right.
And yeah, I've got a wife and 3 kids, and I live here outside of New York, outside of the city, I mean.
Sure.
And I divide my time pretty evenly between America and Europe. And I'm still studying with Laura. She's been my teacher since Miss Harshaw died in 97, right? You've been my teacher since 1998, and I am blessed to have her. And yes, I did study with Miss Harshaw, though Laura teaches differently from Miss Harshaw. Her ears were trained in quite a similar way, and she's helped me maintain and build on the work that I did with Miss Harshaw into something hopefully more that will continue to last me hopefully longer.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
Yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Great. So we have the wonderful opportunity, having both of you here, to kind of talk about the singer-teacher relationship. The importance of that through the career, through all stages, not just from when you're a student at a school, but also to when you you're singing at the Met every season since the 90s. Talk a little bit about that. What's so important about having a teacher, especially in your later career? What are you using them for? Is it more focus on your technique, or is it to have another ear listen to you?
Look, the list of people who we have who can hear us and understand what our issues are and the things that we struggle with, and who know our voices and who understand how to speak a language that we can get, is short.
Right.
For me, it's Laura and my wife. That's my whole list.
Beautiful.
I would add perhaps John Fisher, who was a coach at the Met. He was the head of the music staff and has been a coach through. I worked with virtually every great conductor the last 30, 40 years. But virtually nobody else, even my agent, I think, who I wouldn't trust him to give me vocal advice. So I would trust him to give me an advice which says, I didn't think you sang this as well as other things I've heard you sing.
Sure.
And again, he's not offering me advice, but just talking about ears that understand your voice. As you grow, as your body changes, as your repertory changes, as you and embrace different styles of singing and different languages, all those things, it's up to the people who understand your voice best to help you stay on the right track, to help you grow, and to help you choose repertory, or to help you understand why, when you've just been singing Tales of Hoffmann, why Dalla sua pace and Don Giovanni might be harder,
Sure.
which is something that I faced over the years. And as you get older, just like any athlete, and gosh, Laura has said this to me, your body responds with less elasticity. You have less youthful exuberance to carry the load.
Sure.
And things have to be done even better, more smart, more with more attention paid to detail than you might have paid when you were younger, because it was okay.
Sure.
So I'm still studying with Laura, and we see each other mostly now by way of Skype or
Right.
by way of FaceTime or whatever. I was lucky to have got to see her in New York in February. Anytime she's up here, I try to make time.
Sure. So, Laura, talk a little bit about, what it's like teaching at these different levels. You have students of all different abilities and all differing stages of their career. So what is that? What is it like from person to person?
Well,
Big
that's
question.
what's I think been the most interesting about my teaching career is that, I work with a promising young freshman and then turn around and work with somebody like Matthew or somebody like you. That work has just enhanced my work for the younger singers, that I have an idea of the direction that a young singer needs to go and how much technical information they need to have. It's always been my goal to make my students have enough information that they're independent of me, not dependent on me. I mean, that's how Miss Harshaw raised me. You should know what to do when you're on your own.
Right.
And to have somebody to check in with, she used to tell me, look, we built this thing, and every now and then you have to come back and I need to put some mortar in the holes.
Right.
It's an interesting relationship, the singer-teacher relationship. There's a lot of trust on both sides. There's lots of it. I have to do a lot of homework to keep up with somebody like Matthew.
Sure.
It's important that, and I said this when I did the master class for the Nats convention, that you hear your students in various venues, not just the studio. Even like when we're in Washington, I like to hear you in the big room, but I needed to come see the magic flute. I needed to
That's
see
right.
how you all produce the sound that we're working on in the studio in the theater.
Right.
And now I have that in my ear. I mean, I've heard Matthew at Avery Fisher Hall, now Geffen Hall, Carnegie Hall, the Met, City Opera, in almost every New York venue. And I think it's important to be able to hear the work done in a professional theater
Sure.
or in any theater. I've had a real interest in repertoire as I've developed as a teacher. Did 2 sabbaticals about developmental operatic repertoire and how to assign it.
Sure.
And so then as I work with my professional singers and I can go back to my college singers, I know what type of repertoire to assign them so that they arrive at the operatic rep that they would eventually sing. Talking about doing my homework, I mean, Matt's one of many singers that I work with. And so I have to make sure I know what's best for him and his repertoire and what's going on in his voice, as opposed to maybe a soprano I'm working with or a different type of tenor I'm working with. One year I went through and listened to just about everything we had worked on over these years, starting with Troyan and Traviata and Romeo and Rigoletto and all the Mozart roles and Werther and I had noticed, and when he and I worked together, that anytime he sang in French, his Italian was better. And so it just made I was curious about that, why that happened. And so, so then I'm not going to say what it is, but anytime we get together, there's a particular part of his voice that we usually deal with.
That's true for everybody. Come on. We're always
true.
A side joke.
Has a part of voice. Right.
Listen, mine was a C major scale and not cracking between E and F, but I don't teach in a way that I say, here, do it like me. I want to find your voice.
Sure.
When I'm working with you, Matt Pierce, as opposed to you, Matt Polenzani, I want to hear different tenors. I don't want to certainly don't want to impose my voice on you, and I don't want to impose Matthew's voice on you.
Right.
I need you to have your own voice. So it's not as easy to teach that way.
Sure. Absolutely. So let's divert away from music for just a second, then we'll come back. But let's talk about, extra musical talents. What other hobbies, what sort of, are there other musical things that you do as well that, kind of involve themselves in your work?
I would say it doesn't make sense, but I would say gardening.
Sure.
And, making something beautiful, the creation of something else is certainly serves art. That's my biggest passion right now, getting my gardens ready and keep my house, looking nice and enjoying art, reading history and reading literature that feeds this art form, and to get away from it. I'd rather go, when I was teaching in Princeton, I had a classical music station I listened to going into school and a jazz station listening to going home.
That's right.
And I made a promise. I don't have it anymore because I've moved to a place where I now have a piano and I'm teaching out of my house. But I used to not teach from home. I decided I needed to get away from it and come home so that I still love doing it.
That's right.
But I guess that's the only hobby I have is gardening.
Sure. And Matt?
Well, yeah, I'm sort of like Laura in that, like, I really only have one big hobby too, and that's golf.
Oh, nice.
Which, you might not necessarily think, well, what is golf doing for your singing? Well, there are a couple things. I mean, the obvious advantage of being outside and walking around and having 4 hours of time where your brain is absolutely focused on something else.
Sure.
But beyond that, the work of hitting a golf ball requires a certain muscular
coordination.
Yes, coordination. Perfect. And so singing is quite similar. I mean, different muscles are being used, but you have to engage breath and open the throat and lift the palate and all the, all this stuff has to happen. And it's similar in golf. So like when I'm trying to focus on my technique, for example, I apply the same principles when I'm walking around on the golf course trying to hit a golf ball.
Right.
I have 3 smaller children. I mean, I have a 13-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 9-year-old.
Right.
And so when I'm home, it doesn't lend itself to lots of time playing golf.
Right.
Which is all right because I usually, when I'm on the road, I bring my clubs with me most every place that I go.
Right.
So I mean, like, I try to maximize the time playing when I am away from the house working. So yeah, I really won't. I mean, I love to read also. I'm a voracious reader, again, more when I'm away from home than I am when I'm here.
Sure.
But I mean, I would say those are the two things that occupy most of my time outside of music.
Sure. So let's now talk about being away from home. Matt, you're away from home a lot because you're singing a lot, and Laura, you're away from home, and you were even more before. You're away teaching a lot too. So how have you balanced life in that way, between your professional traveling all the time and being able to have a home and a place where you can settle?
Well, in my case, Rosa and I have been married 24 years. It'll be 25 years next year.
Oh, congratulations.
And we set a limit for ourselves of 6 weeks of separation. Since we have been married, we have crossed that 6 week threshold only one time. 6 weeks. Why 6 weeks? Because we thought that it was long enough that it would cover most jobs, but not so long that that we wouldn't recognize each other when we came home.
That's right.
And I don't mean because we can't look at each other on Skype or on FaceTime or Zoom or whatever, although when we got married, those things didn't exist. But more it had to do with every little thing that happens to you changes you, even if it's in a really minuscule way. Over 6 weeks, all those little minuscule changes can add up to an appreciable change, if it's not a big change, but something noticeable. We figured out that the first 7 days, 10 days back together, when we'd been apart for 6 weeks, or 4 weeks, or even 3 weeks, 2 weeks less so, but I mean, like for a bit of time, that we had to be ultra graceful with each other.
Sure.
Because the little things that would normally not tick you off, even the tiniest bit, feel a lot different when you've only been thinking about yourself. Or now in Rosa's case, like if I leave her home with the kids and her life is full when I'm not here.
Absolutely.
It's full while I am here. And in some ways it's worse because I'm a tenor and I need more
Right.
care.
And you need attention, right?
Exactly. But I mean, even when I'm here to help with the driving and help with the cooking and help with the cleaning and all those things, it's her organization that has it all put together. So I mean, like, we just have to be really ultra graceful with each other for a week or two to let the feeling of being an us settle back in rather than a me. So that's a huge lesson that if people ask me at all ever about relationships or how we've managed to remain happy over all these years, that's a big key. That is a huge key. And also just to say that, man, not every day in marriage is a happy one.
Right.
Sometimes it's hard. And that doesn't mean it's over. It just means you're working through something.
Sure.
And people take the occasional rocky section they use that to build on a reason to get out, rather than just trying to figure out a way to work towards what brought you together.
Sure. Great. And Laura?
Well, I would agree with what he had to say. The one who leaves and then comes back upsets the rhythm of the household.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and it's hard not to, especially when you're going away and you're by yourself and you want to come back and be with everybody. You want to be with your spouse. You want to be with your pets. You want to be with, because you've been on your own. So it's a very selfish way of life, but it's Matt's got a great attitude about that, and it's it's understanding the rhythm and getting back into the rhythm when you come back home. And certainly when I started out, it was writing letters, because your phone bills would be ridiculously high.
Right.
I mean, I used to get letters from my family, and I still have some of them. And I could, call once a week and could only talk for maybe 5 minutes. That was it, because it was too expensive. And we had this thing where I'd call home, collect, and they would deny it and then call me back.
Oh, yeah.
And it was cheaper. So it was a different time. And, recently now, it's makes it easier when I can come, we can FaceTime and right before dinner or right after dinner. And I know what's going on at the house. So it's a little bit better that you can still kind of stay involved, but there's no place like home.
That's right. That's right.
Something else I often tell kids, by the way, younger people, is I talk to Rosa probably 5 or 6 times a day at least,
Right.
which sounds like, wow, that's a lot. I mean, what are you saying? Well, I don't know. Why do we talk so often? Well, man, I want to know everything that's going on at home. I want her to know what's going on with me. And I'm especially bad at remembering things like, my conversations I had with conductors or colleagues or
Sure.
directors or whatever. Or what did the director say? Well, he liked it. And then I'd have to actually engage my brain and talk to her about what's being said so she can understand better. It has more to do with making sure that I mention the stuff that's going on, so
Right.
that the things that happen to me, she can appreciate and understand better later when we're, like I said, all these little changes add up into a bigger change. I mean, that talking today, it's easier than ever just to
Yeah.
chat, so you guys have an advantage.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, on a lighter note, also, give us some of your travel advice. You both are very avid travelers. What should we be doing when we travel?
Find something to keep something normal everywhere you go.
Sure.
I know I'd have colleagues who would bring the same pillow just so they know that they're going to sleep on the same pillow every night,
Right.
or something that makes your environment feel like, if you know you're going to be there for a while, that this is going to be comfortable and you know exactly how you want your environment to be. Don't pack too much.
Right.
Pack as light as you can. Enjoy, if you get, I've been to so many places around the world, and either while I was singing or teaching, and you're so concerned usually about, is this going to work? And that you just sometimes stay holed up in your hotel, but you need to go out and see the culture and see the places where where this career can take you,
Sure.
and soak it in.
Absolutely.
For me, I would say, that grabbing onto something that makes you feel semi-normal is huge. Here, when I'm home, for example, if I go to the grocery store, I've likely clipped coupons.
Right.
I have, I'm looking for sales, etc. If I'm on the road, I'm not worrying about that stuff. If I'm in the mood for some sort of pasta with pesto or whatever, then I'm just gonna buy some pesto sauce, or I might, instead of getting like domestic Parmesan, I might go ahead and get Parmigiano Reggiano or something, like I try not to hold back with those sorts of things, so that whatever creature comforts are around me are things that actually would give me pleasure. Well, the other thing, I mean, to try and make sure not just that you're connected at home, but that you're doing things, if it means going to a gym or going for a run or even a walk or renting a bike or renting a car, and making sure that you're, I mean, for me, golf is always important, but if you're in Chicago in January, well,
Oh,
I
good
mean,
luck.
that's
Right.
that's a problem. To try and just make your day full of some things that aren't related to your job.
Sure.
To make your day, to give your brain something else to do, to give your body a chance to just let go of the grind of rehearsal and performance and singing, and just remind yourself that you're a human.
Sure.
And that humanity, the happiness of your humanity is certainly going to show in your singing, as would sadness. And people often talk about like how, like if you're going through a divorce, if there's been a death in your family, or these sorts of things, how singers often go through slumps through times like these. And of course, it's easy to understand. So figuring out a way to like bring some happiness to your regular daily life is going to make a huge positive impact on your singing.
Beautiful.
It's also
Absolutely.
important that you make sure especially if you're traveling for a gig, that you know what you're traveling there to do first and foremost.
Right.
That you want to make sure that you hydrate on the plane, that you know how you deal with jet lag if you're going far away, that you know how to check in with your voice and make sure it's there. If you know that you have a rehearsal the day after travel, you need to make sure that you're going there for your job,
Sure.
first and foremost, and making sure that, you know, it's, I remember Lenore Rosenberg at the Met said, professional opera singers can sing any time.
Right.
So it's your job to make sure that you can show up and be rested and can start rehearsing. And then do all those other things, explore, but know what the limits are so that you know that you can then go to rehearsal the next day. You're not sunburned, or you're not hungover, or you're not something because, you know, you decided to go out and have a great party. I also found that the time in between performances was more difficult. I love the rehearsal period, but then if you have several days in between performances, and then how do you fill that time, making sure that you can be a tourist and you can do happy things, but you also need to check in with your voice.
Yeah.
And don't leave it alone for 5 days and then show up at the performance. So
Right.
During this time of having to be isolated and be at home all the time, you don't have to go to a coaching. You don't have to practice.
Right.
But finding a method of practice, a routine of various vocalises, or if it's a phrase of your favorite song or aria that you know, if I sing this phrase, I know my voice feels good.
Sure.
That you have that you can do throughout the day, and to make sure that it's there,
Right.
and then go play.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.